Today, we will be looking at two horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. The first one begins with a devastating phone call in the middle of the night. What started as a routine cave exploration quickly turned into back-to-back underground nightmares. A 20-hour fight for survival. The next story is about a father and daughter duo that entered a cave looking for an underground waterfall, but they never came back. Their panicked children called 911 at midnight, triggering one of the biggest rescue operations. As always, viewer discretion is advised. At 2:30 in the morning, the phone rang, jolting Logan's mother from deep sleep. Her husband Lonnie reached for it while she listened anxiously beside him. Nothing good ever came from calls at this hour. The voice belonged to one of Logan's college friends. Logan's trapped in the cave. The next few sentences turned their world around. He's been stuck down there for over 7 hours. The rescue workers are here, but things look really bad. You need to come now. Logan's mother collapsed beside the bed, trembling as images flooded her mind. Her 20-year-old son trapped in crushing darkness, maybe dying. 12 hours earlier, May 18th, 2012, had started like any other spring day. Logan Eliason and his college friends had driven to Maquoketa Cave State Park in Iowa for a weekend camping trip. It was something they did regularly. Logan had been exploring these caves since he was a boy, first with his father Lonnie, then with his friends as he grew older. The group set up camp and spent the afternoon exploring different caves throughout the park. Logan knew these limestone corridors like the back of his hand. As evening approached around 7 p.m., the group gathered around their campfire to prepare dinner. The day had been perfect for caving. Not too hot, not too cold. Most of the friends were content to relax and cook, but Logan and his friend Emma Thompson weren't quite ready to call it a day. Logan pointed towards a trail that led to Wye Cave. Emma, also an experienced cave explorer who had been through many of these caves before, agreed. They grabbed their headlamps and headed off, promising the others they'd be back within an hour or two to help with dinner. Wye Cave welcomed them. Logan led the way confidently through passages he had navigated dozens of times. They moved deeper into the cave system. Logan was excited to show Emma a section of the cave she hadn't seen before. There was an incredible chamber just through a particular passage where the rock formations were amazing. What Logan didn't realize was that caves can be deceptively dangerous. A passage that seems routine can become a death trap under the wrong circumstances. The passage began to narrow dramatically as they ventured deeper. Logan, being taller and more familiar with the cave, managed to squeeze through a particularly tight section without much difficulty. Behind him, Emma followed, trusting his lead completely. But as the passage continued to constrict, Emma began to feel something was terribly wrong. The walls seemed to be closing in around her like a vice. Her breathing became labored, not from exertion, but from growing panic, as the space around her body grew tighter and tighter. Emma called out to Logan, her voice already showing strain, saying she thought she was getting stuck. Logan called back reassuringly, telling her to take her time and breathe slowly while inching forward. But Emma's situation was rapidly becoming critical. The passage had narrowed to a point where her body was wedged between the floor and ceiling of the cave. Every time she tried to move forward, the space seemed to grip her tighter. What had started as discomfort was now becoming a terrifying trap. She felt like the cave walls were crushing her, and she couldn't breathe properly. Logan realized immediately that this was no ordinary stuck situation. He could hear the terror in Emma's voice. In the absolute darkness of the cave, being unable to move felt like being buried alive. Working carefully in the narrow space, Logan managed to turn around, a difficult and exhausting process underground. He reached back and found Emma's hand, gripping it tightly and reassuring her that he was right there and they would get her out. Emma was hyperventilating now, her panic attacks making everything worse. The cave felt like it was suffocating her, squeezing the life out of her with every breath. Logan stayed calm, holding her hand and talking to her continuously. When she started shivering from the cold cave air and her own shock, he removed his shirt and worked it back to her for extra warmth. Fortunately, another couple was exploring Wye Cave that same evening. They heard Emma's distressed calls through the passages and found their way to the trapped pair. But When they saw the situation, Emma wedged tightly in the narrow passage with Logan, unable to help her move. They realized this was far beyond what anyone without specialized equipment could handle. The couple told them they were going to get help before heading quickly toward the cave entrance to call 911. Above ground, as full darkness settled over the state park, emergency vehicles began arriving. Rescue crews entered Wye Cave with specialized equipment, working carefully in the narrow passages to reach Emma. They promptly started the supposedly only rescue operation of the night. The rescue operation for Emma took careful coordination. Working in shifts because of the limited space and oxygen, they started chiseling the passage to make more space and making sure it's done in a way that the cave walls don't collapse. After 4 hours underground and 30 minutes of careful extraction work, Emma was finally freed from the passage that had held her prisoner. She emerged with scrapes and bruises and was taken to the hospital, but she was alive and safe. Logan felt tremendous relief watching Emma being carried out of the cave. He had held her hand for hours, talking her through her panic attacks and keeping her warm in the cold underground air. But his relief was short-lived. Things were about to get worse. When the rescue workers began leading him out through the same route they had used for Emma, Logan discovered something that would turn his relief into his own nightmare. As Logan tried to maneuver over a crevice in the passage, exhausted from the hours of stress and physical strain, he slipped. In an instant, he dropped deep and found himself wedged even more severely than Emma had been. He was stuck face down with his arms pinned beneath him, his body trapped between rock formations with a solid ledge above him pressing down. Unlike Emma's situation, this was far more dire. Logan couldn't move at all. He couldn't even turn his head properly. The rescue that should have ended with Emma's freedom had become something much worse. Outside, panic erupted as soon as everyone received the news of Logan being trapped, and that too, in a more peculiar situation. The rescuers were well aware of how tight the passage is, and how oxygen depletion could kill him in a short amount of time. His trapped position also meant that his blood will start flowing towards his brain, and the gravity pull will strain all his organs, causing medical complications. Hours passed away as rescuers tried to get Logan out. The operation was now much more difficult. Logan's family was contacted immediately. As soon as the news reached his parents, Logan's father held his wife as she trembled in his arms. He told her he had to go to the cave site and that she should stay with their 4 younger boys who were still sleeping, unaware their big brother was fighting for his life underground. By dawn, Logan's mother couldn't wait any longer. She had to go, so Logan's grandfather drove her to the cave site, where a massive rescue operation was underway. Dozens of emergency vehicles filled the area. Ambulances, fire trucks, police cars, EMT trucks from across the region. A steady stream of rescue workers moved in and out of the cave entrance. She found Lonnie on a hill overlooking the cave, his jaw clenched with worry. The news was grim. Logan was trapped face down with his arms pinned beneath him. Above him was a solid rock ledge. The space was so narrow that only one rescue worker could access it at a time, and they could only work 20-minute shifts because there wasn't enough oxygen. Lonnie explained that they had managed to get oxygen near Logan, but he was still too hard to reach properly. The rescue workers brought in air chisels to carefully chip away at the rock, but progress was painfully slow. They managed to get power bars to Logan to maintain his energy and started an IV to prevent dehydration. The oxygen mask was crucial. The confined space and noise from the chisels created dangerous conditions. Hours crawled by as Logan's parents waited on the hill, knowing their son was somewhere directly beneath their feet. One rescue worker approached with encouraging news. Logan had freed one arm and was actually close enough to touch the rescuer's collar. They could finally get him better oxygen access. But then Logan's mother overheard Lonnie speaking quietly to another rescuer, telling him that if Logan went into shock or if they thought he wasn't coming out, Lonnie wanted to go down to hold his boy's hand. When she asked a rescue worker what they should pray for, his answer was sobering. Pray that Logan has the strength to help lift himself out. That's the only way. The reality was stark. After nearly 20 hours underground, Logan would need to find whatever strength he had left to help pull himself free. The rock formation made it impossible for rescuers to lift him out alone. As the hours passed, friends began singing hymns for comfort, Logan's mother, initially too overwhelmed to join in, eventually found her voice in "Amazing Grace." The words felt meaningful. They had come through dangers and trials, and they were praying grace would lead Logan home. Down in the cave, Logan was fighting his own battle against exhaustion and fear, but he wasn't giving up. Like his mother above ground, he found strength in song, quietly singing to himself in the darkness, knowing somehow that God was there with him in the depths. The rescue operation had reached a critical point. The air chisels had done all they could. The rescuers had carefully chipped away every bit of rock they safely could, without risking a collapse that would trap Logan permanently. Now came the most dangerous part of the entire operation. The rescue workers explained to Logan that they had created just enough space for him to possibly squeeze free, but he would need to use whatever strength he had left to help get himself out. The rock formation made it impossible for them to simply lift him. He had to be an active participant in his own rescue. Logan, exhausted and oxygen deprived after 20 hours underground, somehow found the strength to work with his rescuers. Using the small amount of space they had created, he managed to get better leverage with his arms. The rescue workers positioned themselves to help guide and support him, but the actual movement had to come from Logan himself. It was agonizing work. Every inch forward required tremendous effort from Logan, who was fighting against exhaustion, dehydration, and the crushing weight of rock around him. Then, in a moment that seemed almost miraculous after the endless hours of careful chiseling and failed attempts, Logan managed to pull his torso free from the crevice that had held him prisoner. The rescue workers immediately grabbed him and helped guide him through the passage to safety. The word spread quickly through the command center above ground. Logan was free of the crevice. He was conscious, responsive, and moving under his own power through the cave passages toward the entrance. When Logan finally emerged from Wye Cave, 20 hours after he had entered it the evening before, he was barely recognizable, covered head to toe in limestone dust and cave mud, exhausted beyond measure, with scrapes and bruises covering his arms and face. But he was walking, and he was breathing, and he was home. His mother rode with him in the ambulance to the hospital, unable to take her eyes off her son, touching his hand to make sure he was really there. The nightmare that had begun with a 2:30 a.m. phone call was finally over. The next story is about a father and daughter that went caving in Virginia and vanished, triggering one of the biggest rescue operations in the region. July 3rd, 2021. Sharp's Cave in Virginia stretched like a black mouth into the mountainside. 40-year-old Arlen checked his watch one final time before stepping into the darkness with his 19-year-old daughter Lexi beside him. It was 3 p.m. on a warm summer afternoon. The plan seemed simple enough: explore the cave system and find the famous waterfall that other cavers had described. What could go wrong on a basic cave tour? Everything. Arlen and Lexi were what experienced cavers call tourist cavers, people drawn to underground exploration without proper training or equipment. They carried basic flashlights instead of proper cave lighting systems. No helmets protected their heads from low-hanging rocks. Their clothing was completely wrong for the cave's cold, wet environment. But they were excited. The idea of discovering an underground waterfall felt like the adventure of a lifetime. They had heard other visitors talking about the stunning formation deep within the cave system, and curiosity got the better of them. Sharp's Cave wasn't just any cave system. It was a complex maze of passages, rooms, and dead ends. The cave stretched for miles underground, with multiple levels and interconnected chambers that created a three-dimensional puzzle. The waterfall they were seeking wasn't marked on any tourist map. It required navigating through sections with names like Catfish Hall, areas where passages split in multiple directions and every tunnel looked identical. The cave had already claimed its share of victims over the years. Local rescue teams knew it well as a place where overconfident explorers regularly got themselves into trouble. The cave formations created natural traps where people could become disoriented within minutes of leaving the main passage. As father and daughter moved deeper into the cave, their cheap flashlights began to dim. The batteries were dying faster than expected in the cold, damp air. Cave environments are notorious for draining battery power quickly due to the constant humidity and temperature changes. But they pressed on, determined to find that waterfall. The deeper they went, the more complex the cave became. Side passages branched off in every direction. Some led to beautiful formations and hidden chambers. Others ended in dead ends or dangerous drops. Without a map or proper navigation skills, they were essentially playing Russian roulette with their lives. Hours passed. The passages seemed to multiply around them. Every turn led to another choice, left or right, up or down. They tried to remember their route back, but in the darkness, every rock formation looked the same. The cave walls all had similar textures and colors, making it impossible to distinguish one area from another. By 6 p.m., they were completely lost. The cave temperature was a constant 54 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 degrees Celsius. Without proper clothing, hypothermia became a real threat. Their inadequate lights were failing, plunging them deeper into a world of absolute darkness. Panic began to set in. Arlen tried to stay calm for his daughter's sake, but internally he was fighting growing terror. They had no backup lights, no emergency supplies, no way to signal for help. Worse yet, nobody above ground knew exactly where in the cave they had planned to go. They wandered for hours, calling out for help, but sound travels strangely in cave systems. Sometimes voices echo for miles through limestone corridors. Other times, they're swallowed completely by the rock formations, making it impossible for rescuers to locate the source. As the hours dragged on, their situation became increasingly desperate. Dehydration was setting in. Their bodies were burning through energy reserves trying to stay warm. The psychological stress of being trapped in complete darkness was taking its toll on both father and daughter. Meanwhile, above ground, Arlen's two younger children, aged 10 and 16, were getting worried. Their father had promised to be back by evening for a family barbecue planned for the 4th of July holiday. When 11:30 p.m. arrived with no sign of their family, the teenagers made a decision. They called 911. The 911 dispatcher initially treated it as a routine missing persons report. But when the teenagers explained that their father and sister had been exploring a cave system and were now 8 hours overdue, the call was immediately escalated to emergency status. The emergency call triggered a massive response. The Shavers Fork Fire Rescue Team was first to arrive, but they quickly realized this wasn't a job for regular firefighters. Cave rescue requires specialized training, equipment, and knowledge that most emergency responders don't possess. Caves present unique challenges: unstable rock formations, flooding risks, hypothermia dangers, and navigation complexities that can kill rescuers as easily as victims. Virginia State Police contacted Jennifer Boyle of the Eastern Region National Cave Rescue Commission. Boyle was an experienced cave rescue specialist who had participated in dozens of underground emergencies over the years. But even she had never been inside Sharp's Cave before, which would make the rescue exponentially more difficult. Boyle understood the urgency. After 12 hours in a cave environment, hypothermia could easily kill someone wearing inappropriate clothing. She gathered her team, her husband and two children, who were also trained in cave rescue, and headed for the cave entrance with emergency equipment. At 1:30 a.m. on July 4th, Boyle's team entered the cave for what's called a hasty search, a quick reconnaissance to locate the missing cavers before hypothermia could kill them. They carried powerful LED lighting systems, communication equipment, and emergency medical supplies. But Sharp's Cave had other plans. Even with proper equipment and training, Boyle's team couldn't locate the waterfall area where Arlen and Lexi were believed to be trapped. The cave system was too complex, with too many branching passages and hidden chambers. They searched the most obvious routes first, but came up empty. The clock was ticking. Every hour that passed increased the likelihood that the missing cavers would succumb to hypothermia or dehydration. Cave environments are unforgiving. They don't care about your experience level or good intentions. After 2 hours of searching, Boyle made the difficult decision to exit and call for massive reinforcements. This rescue was going to require a coordinated effort involving multiple teams and specialized equipment. By 8:30 a.m., approximately 40 cave rescue specialists were converging on Sharp's Cave. This represented one of the largest cave rescue operations in Virginia's history. Teams came from multiple counties, bringing specialized equipment including communication systems, warming gear, medical supplies, and powerful lighting systems. The rescue operation was like a military campaign. Teams were assigned different sections of the cave. Communication lines were run from the surface deep into the cave system, using field telephones that could work in the underground environment. Every passage had to be methodically searched and marked to prevent teams from covering the same ground twice. Around 10 a.m., Christopher Spence and Mystic Miller formed a search team focused on an area called Catfish Hall. This section of the cave had been overlooked in earlier searches because it seemed too difficult for inexperienced cave explorers to reach. They were wrong. Deep in Catfish Hall, Spence and Miller made a shocking discovery that left them stunned. Two dark shadow-like figures huddled together at the corner. After looking closely with their flashlights, they realized it was Arlen and Lexi. Both were alive, but in serious trouble. They had been trapped in the cave for 19 hours. Their bodies were shaking uncontrollably from hypothermia. Their cheap flashlights had died hours earlier, leaving them in complete darkness. They were dehydrated, exhausted, and terrified. But they were alive. Spence and Miller immediately began emergency treatment. They shared warm clothing, food, and water with the hypothermic pair. Most importantly, they provided proper cave lights that would guide them safely out of the maze. The journey back to the surface took several more hours. Arlen and Lexi had to be carefully guided through passages they never would have navigated alone. Every step had to be planned to prevent further injury or exhaustion. When they finally emerged into daylight, both father and daughter were suffering from mild hypothermia and severe dehydration. But they were alive and uninjured. What made this story remarkable wasn't just the successful rescue. It was what happened afterward. Despite their terrifying ordeal, Arlen and Lexi hadn't lost their fascination with caving. Instead of being traumatized by the experience, they wanted to learn how to do it properly. Mystic Miller, one of their rescuers, invited them to join the Greenbrier Grotto, a local caving organization that teaches proper techniques, safety procedures, and cave conservation. Rather than being banned from caves after their mistake, they were welcomed into a community that would teach them how to explore safely.